What up, y'all? St. Pete. So, I got the idea to do the video today from a friend of mine who I was telling about. Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, shaping the moral, spiritual, cultural, political, and economic decline of the United States of America. I was telling a friend of mine about it and how much it costs now, how much is how much it's gone up, and he was shocked. He just couldn't believe it. And he was like, what's in that book? I said, a lot of things dealing with psychology and the media, the origins of the media, where did the media come from, and how it was all started. This idea of um, giving information to the public. So yeah, so I said, let me read a little bit from it. So that's what I'm gonna do in this. I'm gonna read from the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations by Dr. John Coleman. Now, mind you, this book was written in 2005, right? So this was written in 2005. And I also keep in mind, how did we get here? How did we get to where we're at right now as a society, as the whole world? Keep this in mind. Like, I know people got to be asking, like, yo, how did we get here to, we got to ask what a woman is, all the other crazy stuff that's going on, right? How did we get here? And what I'm going to lay out in this, I went through the book and just made some marks, and I'm going to read this in an order where first I'm going to say some of the names of the players, and then, some of their ideas, and, then some of the methods of the control of how they do it, right? So while I'm saying this, keep in mind what's going on today, and think about, everything that we, like as far as entertainment, every institution, you know what I mean, is using like this methodology is being used in almost every institution to a degree. There's, all types of ways of manipulating reality. But so I'm just going to read a little bit from this, and hopefully it gives people some clarity on, how did we get to where we are today. Um, so Dr. Kurt Lewin was the chief theoretician of Tavistock, who specialized in the teaching and application of topological psychology, which was and remains the most advanced method of behavior modification. Tavistock Institute. This is a place in England. All right, it came along with the Royal Institute of International Affairs. This is the just another tentacle of the Royal Institute of International Affairs. So Lewin was assisted by Major General John Rawlins Rees, which I'll read a quote for him on the next couple pages. Keep that name in mind. Eric Trist, W.R. Byron, H.V. Dix, and several of the greats of brainwashing and social engineering, like Margaret Meads and her husband, Gregory Batson. Bernays was the top consultant right up to the time George Bush was placed in the White House by the Supreme Court. So we do not want to get too technical, and thus will not get into specifics on how they applied the new sciences. Most will accept the generic term of brainwashing as an overall explanation of the activities of this, the mother of all think tanks. So it will come as no small surprise to learn that Lewin and his team founded the Stanford Research Center, where they were doing some MK Ultra was going on there, the Wharton School of Economics, MIT, and the National Institute of Mental Health, among scores of other institutions fondly believed to be American institutions. During the course of years, the federal government contributed millions upon millions of dollars to Tavistock and its expanded web of interlinking institutions, while corporate America and Wall Street came up with matching accounts. So they're just some of the names. Edward Bernays. Edward Bernays is, the godfather of marketing. I got a bunch of books by him. I showed them before and stuff. Just got to keep coming back to these people because, sometimes even when you know what you know, and you'll see stuff on the news, and you'll get, emotionally pulled in either direction. Like, that's the point. They want you to be emotionally pulled in either direction for right or wrong. It's not really a matter of what's right and wrong when you're dealing with that dichotomy. That's just to pit you against somebody else. Like they just are picking on subjects that there's naturally going to be, disagreements on, and they just, really, exemplify them, that them differences, and cause all types of problems. So this is the guy Edward Bernays, nephew of Sigmund Freud. These are some of his books. So they're the names of some of these characters. There you got. All right. Have you ever watched Fox News, where viewers are given the results of a poll about what Americans are thinking? And then, for the next hour, found yourself shaking your head and wondering what the results of the poll reflected upon your own thinking processes. Then you could only have felt more puzzled than ever. The key to understanding Fox News, and all news for that matter, but this was a time back then when Fox News was really getting picked on, and now they're not getting picked on. I mean, it's just, just reversing the roles. Um, The key to understanding Fox News and the poll might lie in what Littman had to say about such matters. In his 1922 book, Public Opinion, Littman outlined Tavistock's psychological warfare methodology. In an introductory chapter, The World Outside and the Pictures in Our Heads, Littman stressed that the object of study of the public opinion social analyst is reality as defined by internal perception or images of that reality. Public opinion deals with indirect, unseen, and puzzling facts, and there is nothing obvious about them. The situations to which public opinions refer are known only as opinions. Yeah, like he says, that's unseen and puzzling facts, and that's where you get into all the archetype stuff and the young stuff, and you get into all that subconscious stuff. So that, yeah, that what he's saying is, there's a lot of factors going into, creating this public opinion. Okay, the pictures inside the heads of these human beings, the pictures of themselves, of others, of their needs, purposes, and relationship, are their public opinions. Those pictures, which are acted upon by groups of people or by individuals acting in the name of groups, are public opinion with capital letters. The picture inside so often misleads men in their dealings with the world outside, and that's why, the traditions, these esoteric traditions, were around to teach people to align their perception with reality, and that's a problem. Most people's perception does not meet reality. So when they encounter reality with their skewed perception, it's nothing what they expected, creates all types of psychological problems, you know, as you'll see. All right. The picture inside so often misleads men in their dealings with the world outside. From this evaluation, it is easy to take the next decisive step made by Bernays, that the elites who run society can and do marshal the resources of mass communications to mobilize and alter the herd mind. 1 year after Littman's book, Bernays authored Crystallizing Public Opinion. He followed that in 1928 with a book entitled, quite simply, Propaganda. Here. In the first chapter, Organizing Chaos, Bernays wrote, the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our century, of our country. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes are formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men that we have never heard of. Our invisible governors are, in many ways and in many cases, unaware of the identity of their fellow members in the inner cabinet. And that's pretty obvious today. Whatever attitude one chooses to take towards this condition, it remains a fact that in almost every act of our daily lives, whether in the sphere of politics or business, in our social conductor or our ethical thinking, we are dominated by the relatively small number of persons, a trifling fraction of our 120 million, who understand the mental processes and social patterns of the masses. It is they who pull the wires, which control the public mind, who harnessed old social forces and contrive new ways to bind and guide the world. Wow. That's coming from one of the most influential men, in America. All right. That's coming from somebody who knows what's going on behind the scenes. Obviously. I mean? That's Edward Bernays that was speaking there. All right. So here's a quote from. So the first thing I did was go through some names. Second part I just went through was like what their objective is, how they see that they have to literally control every aspect of our thinking, our way of being, our ideas. Everything has to be thought of for us. We are not smart enough to figure it out on our own. We're not good enough to be able to figure none of this out. All right, that's what they're saying to us. The human beings they're just dumb. You're useless eaters. Dude, we just got to program them and just like put them to work and have them get stuff for us that we need. All right, pretty much. So John Rawlins Reese, this was that general. All right, the name that I said in the beginning, and back in 1954, their job is to apply the advanced techniques of psychological warfare as we know them to whole population groups that will grow ever larger, so that whole populations may be more easily controlled. In a world driven completely mad, groups of Tavistock psychologists linked to each other, capable of influencing the political and governmental field, must be arbiters, the power cabal. Yeah, yep. They are the arbiters. They think they're the arbiters of truth. They are the arbiters of, you know. So, again, talking about advanced techniques. Now, this is back in 1954. 1954, and they were talking about, using the most advanced techniques back then. So, this is before social media, obviously, and it's just following suit because that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to create these smaller groups that are fighting each other. And what do we have now? Like I said, keep in mind what's going on today. Think about everything that's going on, everything that's taken place in the last couple years. Think about it and in relation to what it is that I'm saying. See how it corresponds. See the correspondence between what I'm saying and what has taken place in the last couple years. All right. So what else I want to do? Let's see. So okay, so now we're going to this is Bernays, Littman, Cantrell, and Cartwright hypothesis synthesized and concentrated in a World War II setting. The article was featured in Tavistock's journal, Human Relations, which ought to immediately brought the reader to attention. This is all started Tavistock. Um, these Chatham House, these were all things that were started in World War One when the soldiers were getting disillusioned, they didn't want to fight no more, so they had to rush newspapers up to them to tell them they're winning the war to get them to boost their morale back up and what have you. So this is the beginnings of it, World War One. So now we're in the World War II setting. So this is back then, and this is all right what they were saying. Among the many technological advances of the past century that have produced changes in social organization, Cartwright began, the development of mass media of communication promises to be the most for reaching. This heightened interdependence of people means that the possibilities of mobilizing mass social action have been greatly increased. It is conceivable that one persuasive person could, through the use of mass media, bend the world's population to his will. And they knew it. They knew that this thing had to be under control because, just for that reason that somebody could step in, and that's why artists are always controlled. That's why it's there has to be a license on artistry, and only certain artists can make it to the top to have that, that big, massive, platform because they could bend the population, right? So so it is considered principle one. Okay. Principle one, it is considered a truism by virtually all psychologists that a person's behavior is guided by his perception of the world in which he lives. It follows from this formulation that one way to change a person's behavior is to modify his cognitive structure. The modification of cognitive structure in individuals by means of the mass media has several prerequisites. These may be stated in the form of principles. So, the first is the message, the information that they're trying to get across to the person, the people. So, the message must reach the sense organs of the person who are to be influenced. They have to reach your heart. So whatever information that they're trying to convey to you, the manipulation information that they're trying to convey to you, they're going to package it in something that is appealing to your sense organs. So they're going to pull at your heartstrings, like the gun control or, rights for people, and they package it in this pretty package that it's all egalitarian and everything, is done for genuine reasons when that's just not the truth. You know what I mean? There's a whole other thing that comes along with it, right? So this is what they're saying. So they they gotta have total stimulus, and that's what social media is pretty much. People are stimulated all day. Total stimulus situations are selected or rejected on the basis of an impression of their general characteristics. A second set of principles investigated more deeply the methods of altering cognitive structure. Principle 2. Having reached the sense organs, the message must be accepted as part of the person's cognitive structure. Think about the mask wearing and the whole sickness thing, the whole virus. Think about all that message that they were trying to, you don't care about grandma, all the stuff that they were saying. They were trying to, get a message to comply and they were wrapping that message of comply with the state with the you don't love grandma thing. This is what I'm saying. Keep in mind the corresponding, what I mean, how this all works. The message that they're trying to push through, whether it's Roe v. versus Wade, whatever it is that just seems to organically come about as the next big thing. That thing is not organically came about. There's a reason for it. So, keep this in mind. So, having reached the sense organs, a message must be accepted as part of the person's cognitive structure. Cartwright noted in this section that any effort to change behavior through a modification of this cognitive structure must overcome the forces tending to maintain the present structure. So you got to rip down the old thing before you build the new. Same thing. They got to rip down everything that you believed, everything that you thought has to be ripped down and replaced with the new, just like the statues in the country. Same thing. Everything got to be ripped down to rebuild the new thing. And it's like I said, it's no different in the internal world as it is in the outer world. You want to rebuild a new house or something, you got to knock down the old one. You know what I'm saying? Um, yeah. So only when a given cognitive structure seems to the person to be unsatisfactory for his adjustment is he likely readily to receive influences designed to change that structure. Right. So think about people in the hood, that, you know, they it's unsatisfactory, their environment, right? The state of things for poor people, the unsatisfactory state, is it's he can't adjust that. There's nothing he can do about it, right? There's nothing he could do. So it makes the psyche um readily to receive influences designed to change that structure. So they can change cultures, right? Like hip hop is a perfect example how it went from higher infinite power healing people to gangster, right? This is an example of how they did it. Where hip hop is the most obvious one, you know. Well, to me anyway. But yeah, that was, you know, basically how they did that is like to receive the influences designed to change that structure, and that's what they did. People getting money, you know, ready to just, you know, they were ready to receive influences from things that maybe shouldn't have been influencing them. All right, so I got. All right, let's see here. Okay, okay, this is the last one. Okay. Uh, Dr. Fred Emery, at one time the senior psychiatrist at Tavistock, once described as social environmental turbulence. Large populations, groups, manifest the following symptoms when subjected to conditions of violent social changes: stress and turbulence, which can be divided into well defined categories. Superficiality is the condition that manifests itself when the threatened population group reacts by adopting shallow sloganing, which they attempt to pass off as ideals. The hollow slogans, please. The virtue signaling is the worst that it's ever been. Okay, that's the empty slogans. Virtue signaling is a perfect example of that in full effect as we see today. Um, the superficiality, the fakeness of people, again, goes hand in hand with the virtue signaling. Okay, so very little ego investment takes place, making the first phase a maladaptive response because, as Emery stated, the cause of the crisis is not isolated and identified. People don't know because they haven't done the research. They don't know where it's coming from. They don't know how to stop it because they don't even know what's going on, let alone to know how it's going on and who is perpetrating it, right? The course of the crisis is not isolated and identified. And the crisis and tension are not abated, but continues for as long as the controller wants it to last. The second phase of the crisis reaction, since the crisis is continuing, is fragmentation, a condition in which panic strikes. Social cohesion falls apart, with the result that very small groups form and attempt to protect themselves from the crisis with little or no regard for the expense or cost of other fragmented small groups. Look at the virus, man. Look what that did. How many small groups that pinned against each other. This phase Emery calls passive maladaption, while still failing to identify the cause of the crisis. People still are exactly. The third phase is when the victims turn away from the source of the induced crisis and the resulting tension. They take fantasy trips of internal migration, introspection, and obsession with self, the lowercase self. They're obsessed with the lower self, not the higher self, the lower self, okay? Just the carnal desires, okay? This is what Tavistock calls disassociation and self realization. Emery goes on to explain that the passive maladaptation responses are now coupled with active maladaptive responses. Emery states that over the past 50 years, experiments in applied social psychology and resultant crisis management have taken over all aspects of life in America, and the results are stored in the computers in the major think tanks such as Stanford University, 2005 now, AI. The scenarios are taken out, used and revised from time to time, and according to Tavistock, the scenarios are in operation at the present time, and they never stop, boys and girls. Translated, this means that Tavistock has the majority of the American people profiled and brainwashed. If any part of the American public is ever able to identify the cause of the crisis that have washed over this nation in the past 70 years, the social engineering structure built by Tavistock will come crashing down. But that has not yet happened. Tavistock continues to drown the American public in its sea of created public opinion. The social engineering developed by the social sciences scientists at Tavistock has been used as a weapon during the century's two world wars, especially World War One. The pollsters who developed it have been quite frank that they employ on the American population the same devices and methods used and experimented with against enemy populations. So that's why the moment you allow some authority to do something to somebody else and say, "Hey, that ain't me," you have just signed your own death warrant. It's only a matter of time before they do that to you. Today, the manipulation by polls of public opinion has become a central technique in the hands of the social engineers and controllers of the social scientists employed at Tavistock and its many think tanks located all over the United States and Britain. So that's all I got for you today. You know, run it back, look up the names. I mean, it's some powerful stuff, man. It's very it has changed the whole way you look at the media and the way you process the information that you get from the media. You can still watch the media, but you'll process the information differently. Eventually, once you know it, you'll realize, oh man, like you already know what's going on. You already know what it is before. Not that you could predict events, but you just know what it is. Without all the details. You know what I mean? That you could see the big picture. So enjoy your Saturday. Be dangerous to those that threaten freedom. St. Pete, I'm out. Peace.